They say a man can feel the exact moment his life changes. Most folks imagine it's loud, a slammed door, a fight in the kitchen, somebody throwing a suitcase down the stairs. Mine came quieter. It arrived in the form of a phone call at 8:12 on a Tuesday morning, while I was standing in my driveway, tossing a set of socket wrenches into the back of my truck. Not from Melissa. No, from Rachel Myers. Her voice was shaky, wrapped in the noise of morning traffic. She asked me to call you. Tom, she says she's starting a new life, and she's not coming back. I didn't ask where or why. Her pause after the words new life told me more than any explanation could. That pause was loaded, the kind people take when they know the truth will cut too deep to say out loud. I stayed there, in the cold shadow of the truck, phone pressed to my ear long after the call ended. Fern Street was unusually still, the kind of stillness that lets you hear the hum of power lines overhead. Across the street, the Stevens kid was riding his bike in lazy circles. Life kept moving. Mine had stopped. Melissa and I had been married 12 years. We'd built what I thought was solid ground. A two-story colonial in West Hartford, summer evenings on the back deck, Sunday pancakes before church. But looking back now, I realize something. Ground doesn't give way all at once. It erodes. Quietly. You just don't notice the cracks until you're standing ankle-deep in them. I walked back toward the house, each step heavier than the last. Even from outside, I could feel it. Something had shifted. The front door was unlocked. Not wide open, just waiting. I stepped inside and was met with a stillness so sharp, it was almost a sound. A house can have a pulse when two people live in it. That morning, mine was already gone. There's a weight to absence, not just in the air, but in the things missing from it. The faint smell of her perfume didn't greet me from the hallway. The coffee pot was cold. Her favorite mug, the blue one with the chipped handle, was gone from the counter. I stood there for a while, staring into the living room like a man looking at a crime scene. Maybe because it was one. Only, the weapon wasn't a knife. It was a decision. One she'd made long before that phone call. Rachel's voice kept replaying in my head. She's starting a new life. You don't start a new life on a Tuesday morning without planning it for months. Without lining up every piece so it falls just right when you finally let it all collapse. I knew Melissa well enough to know this. She didn't believe in messy exits. She was deliberate, which meant this wasn't just about leaving me. No, there was something else. By the time I shut the door behind me, I could already feel it in my gut. She hadn't simply walked out. She'd engineered her absence like a clean demolition, making sure the walls fell inward, leaving nothing standing that could hold me up. And in that moment, under the hum of those power lines and the weight of that quiet house, I understood something dangerous. Melissa wasn't just gone. She'd left in a way that would make me feel her absence like a knife I couldn't pull out. The first thing I noticed was the air. It didn't smell like home anymore. There was something foreign in it. Sharp, floral, expensive. Not her usual scent, not mine either. Like someone had been here, left their presence behind, and walked out without looking back. Half the living room wall looked naked. The gallery of framed photos we'd collected over the years, gone. The gaps on the wall were lighter than the rest, like pale skin under a watch strap. I could trace the shape of each missing frame from memory. The one from our trip to Acadia, the one of us laughing at her cousin's wedding, the one where she had her arm hooked through mine on the front steps of this very house. I moved toward the hallway, the floorboards groaning under my weight. The master bedroom door stood half open. Inside, the walk-in closet was gutted. Her side, empty hangers swaying slightly, like they'd been disturbed in a hurry. Mine, untouched, shirts still lined up in the order I'd always kept them. On the dresser, a small wooden jewelry box sat open. I'd given her that box on our 5th anniversary, filled it over the years with pieces I could afford, each one a memory in silver or gold. Now it was hollow, except for one thing, a cheap, tarnished heart-shaped pendant she never liked, lying in the corner like an afterthought. I picked it up, turned it over in my hand. It felt light, almost weightless, but heavy in meaning. She'd taken everything of value and left me the one piece she'd never cared for. Back in the kitchen, The table caught my eye. A single sheet of paper lay dead center, weighted down by the salt shaker. For words, written in careful block letters, "It's over. Melissa." I stared at the handwriting. Melissa's penmanship was always a little slanted, like her thoughts were rushing ahead of her hand. But these letters were straight, deliberate, like someone had drawn them with a ruler. It didn't match her at all. My gut tightened. Maybe she wrote it in a different mood. Or maybe she didn't write it at all. I leaned against the counter, letting my eyes wander over the space we'd shared 1,000 mornings. The silence was loud now, too loud. No hum of the fridge, no coffee brewing, no clink of her spoon against a cereal bowl. Just the kind of stillness that feels staged, as if the room was trying to pretend no one had ever lived here. The thought hit me hard. She hadn't just left me. She'd scrubbed her life out of this house like a crime scene cleanup crew. I should have felt rage boiling up, but what I felt instead was colder. A kind of hollow focus, like I'd just stepped into a problem that needed solving. My mind started cataloging details. Missing clothes, missing jewelry, missing photos. The fake handwriting. The strange perfume. Melissa's departure wasn't an impulse. It was a plan. And whoever had been in this house with her, they'd made sure I'd come home to a stage set for pain. That cheap pendant in my pocket felt heavier now. Not because of what it was worth, but because it was the only thing she'd chosen to leave me. A message, maybe, or a warning. Either way, I knew this. The silent house wasn't the end of the story. It was just the first clue. It's funny how the smallest thing can pull a thread loose. You're standing in the wreckage of your life, trying to process the big picture, and then some tiny detail trips you, makes you look closer. For me, it was the desk in the spare room. We'd called it the office, though Melissa mostly used it for paying bills and browsing furniture catalogs. I never went through her drawers, not out of respect, but because I just didn't care to. That morning, I cared. The top drawer was nearly empty, save for a pen, a stack of envelopes, and a single folded piece of paper wedged in the back. I pulled it out. It was a receipt. The Goodwin Hotel, Hartford, Connecticut. Date, 10 days ago. Room 412. My eyes went to the guests line, printed neatly in black ink. There was her name, and beneath it, a man's. Not a coworker I recognized. Not family. Just a name that meant nothing to me, which meant it was about to mean everything. I stood there, reading it again, as if the letters might rearrange themselves into something innocent. They didn't. The paper felt hot in my hand. The Goodwin wasn't the kind of place you stayed for business unless you were trying to impress someone. It was an old boutique hotel downtown, the kind with velvet drapes, dim lighting, and a bar that made you feel underdressed no matter what you wore. Melissa had never mentioned Hartford. She'd told me she was in New York for a yoga retreat. I'd even seen a photo she posted on Instagram. A lake at sunset, the kind of thing you'd find in a meditation guide. Now I wondered how old that picture really was, or where she'd even taken it. The receipt was crisp, too crisp. No folds, no smudges. Like it had been placed there recently. And that's when it hit me. Maybe she didn't forget it. Maybe she left it. I slipped it into my back pocket, feeling its edges like a blade against my wallet. Then I started searching the rest of the room. The bottom drawer held a mess of papers, utility bills, bank statements, tax returns. Nothing unusual until I noticed a gap in the stack of folders. Something had been removed, and recently. The dust along the edge was clean where the folder should have been. In its place was a faint scent, that same cologne I'd noticed earlier in the hallway. Not perfume. Not mine. Him. Whoever he was. I stepped back, scanning the room again. The air felt different now, charged. I'd gone from wondering to knowing. This was more than an affair. Melissa had taken things, left things, staged things. Every choice was deliberate. The Goodwin receipt wasn't just a clue to where she'd been. It was proof. Proof that the yoga retreat was a lie. Proof that she wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, proof that she wanted me to find out, but only on her terms. As I walked out of the office, I felt the weight of it all shifting. She'd planned her exit carefully, but somewhere along the line, she'd slipped. And now I had something solid to work with. I didn't know his face yet, but I had his name, his hotel, and a timeline. And I was going to find out exactly what he'd taken from me, besides my wife. Once you've got a name, you start seeing patterns you didn't know to look for. That receipt from the Goodwin Hotel was still burning a hole in my pocket when I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop. Melissa might have been careful with her exits, but she'd always underestimated one thing: how stubborn I could be when something didn't add up. I started with her work email. She'd logged in on this laptop 100 times. The password was still saved. The first thing I saw was an auto reply. Melissa Callahan is no longer with Ethan Allen. We wish her well in her future endeavors. No longer with Ethan Allen. She'd told me she was just taking a few personal days before her big trip to the retreat. The timestamp on that auto reply? 2 weeks before Rachel's phone call. She hadn't been going to work for half a month, and I hadn't noticed. Digging deeper, I pulled up our joint bank account. That's where the rest of the puzzle started showing its edges. For withdrawals in the past month, each for $4,000, cash. Always from different branches, never the same teller twice. Melissa hated carrying cash. But here she was, draining over 16 grand right under my nose. Then I checked the credit cards. She'd booked spa appointments in New York, except the charges were from a day I knew she'd told me she was working late. And there was a bill from a place called the Blue Dahlia, a high-end restaurant in Hartford. 2 entrees, 2 glasses of wine, and a dessert for 2. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the numbers on the screen. None of it screamed yoga retreat. It screamed something else entirely. She'd been laying a trail, one that looked like noise until you strung it together. I thought about the day she'd mentioned the trip of a lifetime to her coworkers, something I'd overheard her telling one of them on speakerphone. I remember laughing about it later, teasing her about planning vacations without me. She'd just smiled and said, "You're too busy running the company." Now I knew what she meant. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. This wasn't a fling. It was a project. She'd quit her job quietly, built herself a cash cushion, and stacked up enough decoy expenses to make her real plans harder to spot. That cheap pendant I'd found earlier? Now it felt like a calling card. She wanted me to know she'd walked out. She wanted me to understand it was final. But she also wanted me to be too late to stop whatever came next. I closed the laptop and stared at the silent kitchen. This was the same room where we'd sat every morning, her sipping coffee while I went over blueprints for the day. I'd thought those silences were comfortable. Now I wondered if they'd just been empty. Melissa had taken more than her clothes, more than the photos on the wall. She'd taken time, weeks, maybe months, and used it to build a clean escape route. The trouble for her was, she'd left behind just enough breadcrumbs for me to follow, and I was going to follow them. Rachel called again 3 days later. I let it ring twice before answering, not because I was busy, but because I wanted her to feel the weight of those extra seconds. "Tom, hey, I just wanted to check in," she said, her voice carrying that forced brightness people use when they're about to say something they shouldn't. "You've already checked in," I said flatly. "Unless you've got more news." Silence on the other end. Long enough that I could hear the faint murmur of a TV in the background. Then she sighed. "Look, I wasn't supposed to say anything, but I hate the way she's doing this to you." I leaned back in my chair, letting her fill the space. People hate silence. They rush to cover it. "She met him at one of those yoga retreats in New York," Rachel continued. "Minla Retreat and Spa, up in Phoenicia. It started months ago, and now they're talking about this new life together." She paused. "With money from your business." There it was. The phrase landed like a nail through wood, clean, direct, impossible to pull out without splintering everything around it. I kept my voice even. "Money from my business." She said he has plans, big ones. They've been meeting in Hartford, talking about investments. She didn't give me details, but she made it sound like she was done with this life. With you, with West Hartford. She even joked about you being too predictable. That last part didn't sting the way she probably thought it would. Predictable can be an advantage. Predictable is what makes people think they know your next move. "What's his name?" I asked. Rachel hesitated again, and I could almost picture her twisting a phone cord, an old habit from when we were teenagers, calling each other about homework. Ethan Ward, she said finally. He used to own a restaurant, I think. I don't know much else. But, Tom, be careful. She's not the same person you think she is. I almost laughed at that. Not the same person was putting it mildly. Melissa had traded in her life for a man I'd never heard of, and she'd done it with enough confidence to steal from the company I built from the ground up. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at the grain in the tabletop. The name was rolling around in my head, Ethan Ward. It sounded ordinary enough. But ordinary men don't walk into someone else's marriage, someone else's business, and try to take it all. I opened my laptop again, typed the name into a search bar. It didn't take long to find him. Blurry photos from food blogs, a few Yelp reviews mentioning his overpriced but charming Italian restaurant. And then, a little deeper down the rabbit hole, I found the court records. Gambling debts, civil lawsuits in New Haven County Court, an eviction notice from 2 years back. This wasn't a man building a life. This was a man clawing his way out of the one he'd already destroyed. And Melissa had hitched herself to him like he was her lifeboat. That was when the decision settled in me. Not sudden, but like a door clicking shut. I wasn't going to chase her. I wasn't going to beg. No, I was going to make sure that by the time she realized what she'd given up, there'd be nothing left for her to come back to. I didn't sleep much the night I found Ethan Ward's record. Not because I was restless, because I was calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that settles in when you've already decided what you're going to do, and you know there's no turning back. Melissa thought she'd left me in the dust. She thought by the time I pieced everything together, she'd be halfway to whatever new life Ethan had promised. But here's the thing about a man who builds his own company from nothing. We get good at protecting what's ours. The first move was quiet. I called my lawyer, Martin Conway, at 7:15 the next morning. Martin's been with me through every permit dispute, every zoning headache. I told him to draw up transfer papers for all non-liquid assets, the trucks, the equipment, even the warehouse lease, into a holding company under my cousin's name. No fanfare, just a signature here, a filing there. Next came the bank accounts. Melissa and I had a joint checking account for the household, but the company funds were in separate business accounts under my name. I changed every password, set up two-factor authentication tied to my personal phone, and moved a sizable chunk into a contingency fund she didn't even know existed. By noon, I'd locked down the credit cards, too. Anything with her name on it, frozen. The phone call started about an hour later. Unknown number, then another, and another. I let them go to voicemail. This wasn't about cutting her off to hurt her. This was about sealing the exits. If she'd been helping Ethan line up some kind of investment, I wasn't going to bankroll it. That afternoon, I drove out to the warehouse. The smell of sawdust and diesel grounded me, the kind of scent you don't appreciate until you think you might lose it. I walked the floor, talked to the guys, kept my tone easy. No one needed to know what was going on, not yet. The fewer people who could tip her off, the better. On the way back, I stopped at Cafe Sophia in West Hartford Center, ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and watched people go about their lives. Couples laughing, kids running ahead of their parents, a man reading the paper like nothing in the world could touch him. That used to be me. Predictable. Safe. The guy who got up at 6, worked until dark, and never thought twice about whether his wife was really where she said she'd be. Not anymore. By the time the sun dipped low over the street, I had the first phase locked in. Melissa didn't know it yet, but every step she took from here on out was going to land on ground I'd already pulled out from under her. When I got home, I opened the top drawer of my desk. The Goodwin Hotel receipt was still there, folded neatly. I placed it under a fresh legal pad, out of sight, but not out of mind. I wasn't done collecting pieces. But for the first time since Rachel's call, I felt the balance start to tip back toward me. And the best part? She didn't suspect a thing. When you're building a house, you don't start tearing into walls without a blueprint. Same goes for dismantling a man. You find the weak points first, then you apply pressure where it'll hurt most. That's where Mark Donnelly came in. 55 years old, ex-detective with Hartford PD, now running his own little office on Asylum Street. Mark's the kind of guy who still wears a trench coat in August and drinks his coffee like motor oil. He also knows how to make things appear on your desk that shouldn't exist outside a police file. I slid the Goodwin Hotel receipt across his desk. Ethan Ward. I want to know everything. Mark adjusted his reading glasses, scanned the name, then grunted. Yeah, I've heard of him. Not in a good way. 3 days later, he called me back in. His desk was covered in manila folders and printouts. He didn't waste time with small talk. Your boy Ward's a mess. Restaurant folded 2 years ago. Unpaid taxes, suppliers screaming for money. He's got a trail of gambling debts that lead straight to some very patient but very dangerous people in Bridgeport. He ticked items off on his fingers. Civil suits. Eviction. And here's the kicker. 2 of those gambling creditors have liens on anything he puts his name on. Meaning, he looked up at me. Meaning if Melissa ties herself to him financially, she's in the blast radius, I said. Exactly. He's running out of rope, Tom. One hard tug, and the whole thing snaps. I sat back, letting that settle. Melissa thought Ethan was her fresh start. What she didn't see, or didn't want to, was that she'd lashed herself to a sinking ship. Mark slid one last folder toward me. Inside was a list of every known associate Ethan still kept in the area. Poker buddies, ex-employees, a guy who once tried to sue him over a business deal gone sideways. These were the people who'd talk, if you knew how to listen. I traced a finger down the list, memorizing the names. Good work, Mark. Now I just need to figure out how to make him ambitious. Mark raised an eyebrow. Ambitious. If I want them to lose everything, I can't just cut them off. I have to let them think they're about to win. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. You're setting bait. Exactly. That night, I drove the long way home, past the city lights and back into the quiet streets of West Hartford. The air was heavy, thick with the smell of summer rain on hot pavement. In my pocket was a folded piece of paper, Ethan Ward's weak spots, in black and white. I'd built houses from the ground up, fixed foundations other men had written off as hopeless. I knew the difference between a structure worth saving and one you needed to tear down. Ethan Ward was rotten through. All I had to do now was wait for the right moment to swing the hammer. The thing about bait is, it has to smell too good to pass up. If it's too obvious, the fish swims right by. But if it's shiny enough, close enough, they'll bite before they even realize the hook's in their mouth. Ethan Ward wasn't going to fall for some random investment pitch from a stranger. But he might listen if it came through the right channels. People he thought he could trust. That's where the right channels came in. 2 old contacts from my contracting days, both of whom owed me favors. One of them, a guy named Vince, had a knack for looking like money. Armani suits, gold watch, the whole 9 yards. The other, Curtis, could talk about real estate like he was reading from a gospel. Together, they were my frontmen. I handed them a script and told them exactly how to play it. The story was simple, a small but can't-miss renovation project in a prime Hartford location. Old warehouse, perfect for a mixed-use conversion. Retail on the ground floor, luxury condos above. The kind of thing Ethan would think he could get in on before the big developers noticed. And the buy-in? Just enough to require him and Melissa to pool whatever they'd scraped together. Vince bumped into Ethan at a bar he frequented. Dropped the project name casually, like it was insider talk he shouldn't have shared. Curtis followed up a few days later, pretending to be reluctant about letting new partners in. By the end of the week, Ethan was calling Vince to hear more. Meanwhile, I kept my distance. Too close, and they might smell something. Instead, I focused on tightening the noose. Any asset Melissa might try to liquidate now had a wall of red tape around it. The joint account she thought she could lean on? Drained. Credit cards? Maxed out and frozen. I wanted them desperate enough to see this opportunity as their golden ticket. Mark Donnelly kept tabs on Ethan's movements. Lunch with Melissa at a riverside cafe. A closed-door meeting in the back of a wine bar. And then, finally, a visit to a notary's office. They were getting serious. By this point, Vince was feeding Ethan just enough details to make him salivate. Projected returns, architectural renderings, a fake feasibility report, I'd had mocked up by one of my own designers. It looked professional because it was professional. Only the numbers were fiction, the property non-existent. The key was in the timing. Push too hard, and Ethan might back out. Wait too long, and his creditors might beat me to the punch. But on the 9th day after their first meeting, Vince called me. "They're in," he said simply. That night, I sat on my back deck, listening to the cicadas hum in the dark. Somewhere out there, Melissa was telling herself she'd finally landed the big score, that she and her new man were about to build something lasting. She didn't realize she was already standing on the trapdoor. The transfer happened on a Thursday morning, just after 9 a.m. I was in my office, sipping burnt coffee from the breakroom pot, when the alert pinged my phone. A quiet little notification that told me everything was in motion. No alarms, no flashing lights. Just a clean digital handshake between Ethan Ward's account and a shell company in the Caymans that existed only in paperwork and the mind of my attorney. From there, the money split like a river hitting rock, flowing through 2 more destinations before settling somewhere Melissa would never find, even if she spent the rest of her life looking. Mark called an hour later. "It's done," he said, his voice flat, like we'd just finished a routine job. I didn't ask how much. I already knew, every last dollar they could scrounge. Her yoga retreat fund, the cash withdrawals I tracked in the bank statements. Whatever Ethan had hustled from his gambling friends or begged off his dwindling list of contacts. All of it funneled into an investment that didn't exist. By Friday, the cracks were already showing. Mark's guy at the Blue Dahlia, a waiter who owed him a favor, said they came in for lunch and barely touched their food. Melissa's voice was sharp, clipped, every sentence like a slap. Ethan, on the other hand, kept his head low, muttering in short bursts, leaning hard into defense. She accused him of pushing the deal too fast. He accused her of being naive, of not bringing in more capital when she had the chance. By Saturday night, Rachel's name lit up my phone. I let it ring 3 times before answering. "She's a wreck, Tom," Rachel said immediately, skipping pleasantries. "Showed up at my place looking like she'd been crying for hours. Said you ruined her life. Something about an investment gone bad, some kind of warehouse conversion deal. She swears it was supposed to be their ticket out, and now Ethan's talking about cutting his losses." I let her words hang in the air, staring out the kitchen window as the last of the daylight drained away. "She's saying it's all your fault," Rachel added, her tone part curiosity, part accusation. "Of course she is," I said finally. "Melissa's never been the type to blame herself." Rachel was quiet after that. Maybe she heard the steel in my voice. Maybe she just didn't want to know more. By Monday morning, Mark sent me the final update. Ethan was gone. Packed up his car sometime in the night, headed south toward God knows where. His phone was dead. His old contacts in Bridgeport were asking pointed questions, and the creditors who'd once been patient were now anything but. Melissa was alone, no partner, no cash, no plan. Whatever apartment they'd been using was in arrears, the landlord threatening to change the locks. The joint fantasy she'd built had collapsed in on itself in less than a week. That night, I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and sat at the kitchen table, the same place where I'd first opened my laptop and started unraveling her lies. I didn't feel joy. Joy was too cheap a word for this. What I felt was balance, the universe setting the scales back where they belonged. She'd played her hand. I'd played mine. Now all that was left was the final move. I saw her for the last time on a gray Tuesday afternoon in early September. The sky was low and heavy, the kind of overcast that flattens all the colors and makes the air feel thick. It wasn't cold yet, but there was that early bite of autumn riding the wind. I'd just finished a meeting with a supplier downtown and decided to walk instead of drive. My route took me past Café Sophia, a place Melissa and I had been to once or twice, back when we still pretended to have lazy Sunday mornings together. I wasn't looking for her. I'd stopped looking weeks ago, but there she was. She sat at a corner table, framed by the cafe's fogged-up window. Both hands cradled a ceramic mug, as if she was trying to draw heat from it straight into her bones. Her hair was pulled back in a loose knot, a few strands falling forward, and she wore a plain gray sweater that seemed a size too big. There was no ring on her finger, no makeup, and in her eyes, even through the glass, there was a tiredness I'd never seen before. On the table lay a battered leather notebook, open but untouched. I knew that notebook. Years ago, she'd filled it with ideas, sketches for a deck I'd eventually build, lists of places she wanted to visit, even little doodles of furniture layouts for a dream home we'd never buy. Now, the pen sat beside it, idle, as if she'd tried to write something but lost the thread halfway through. She looked up and caught my gaze. For a moment, time folded in on itself. We were back in our kitchen, back in the early days when we still laughed at the same jokes and shared the same plans. Then it was gone. I saw her make the quick calculation, whether to speak, whether to reach across that invisible line between us. I didn't give her the chance. I pushed open the cafe door, the little brass bell above it ringing out in the quiet space. As I passed her table, I leaned in just enough and said, low and clear, "I hope he was worth it." I didn't stop walking. I didn't look back for her reaction. But in the reflection of the glass door as it swung shut, I caught it anyway, her eyes dropping to the table, her shoulders curling inward, the mug tilting slightly, as if she needed both hands to keep it steady. Outside, the air smelled faintly of rain. The traffic hummed in the distance, and the wind carried the dry rustle of early fallen leaves along the sidewalk. I turned up my collar and kept moving, each step pulling me farther from the woman at that table, farther from the version of myself that used to sit across from her. There was no surge of triumph, no cinematic swell of victory, just a deep, still quiet. The kind of quiet that comes when the last box is carried out of a room and the echo finally fades. I didn't wonder where she'd go next, whether she'd find another Ethan or try to piece together something on her own. That was her problem now. She'd chosen her road, and I'd made sure it ended exactly where it deserved to. At the corner, I glanced back once. The cafe window reflected nothing but the street, the moving shapes of strangers. She was gone from view, just like she was gone from my life. Sometimes revenge doesn't come with fire and fury. Sometimes it comes with ice, slow, still, inevitable. And when it finally cracks, you don't stand there to watch. You just keep walking.